in terms of your understanding of the current system, there are some submissions that say that there already is a public benefit test. That's what the tax office looks at. You're saying that's not the case.
Could I submit that that applies to the fourth head of the statute of Elizabeth in my reading of it, and it is never applied to, and that is the groups that claim special exemption for public benefit, which are not poverty, education or religious, but this current public benefit test is never applied to a religious organisation. The quote that I gave you.
Yes, perhaps if I could just move on, and again, if you want to put it on notice, you may wish to. So your understanding is that at the moment, if there are complaints about an organisation which receives tax-free status, that there isn't an adequate mechanism to deal with those complaints. You're saying there's no mechanism.
Senator, there is no mechanism.
Yes. And has your organisation approached, for instance, the Australian Taxation Office to say, we've got concerns about this or that organisation, are you looking into it?
We have not done that.
Individuals, can I just interrupt? Individuals have in the past from their own experiences.
And are you aware of what the response was from the ATO?
No, we have not documented responses from individuals that have done this.
So I'm just trying to establish, you're saying that there is no mechanism for transparency or accountability if there are complaints about an organisation and its tax-free status. It doesn't really go anywhere at the moment in the current system.
In the current system, there is a complete, I believe, disconnect between complaint of harm and tax deductibility. They're not connecting. If we can connect those, we would go a long way to address this issue, and I think the bill does that.
Thank you, Chair.
Senator Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for your evidence this morning. Can I just ask you, given that you are, in your submission, you're very supportive of this bill and the introduction of a public benefits test, are you aware of, I know you were here earlier, I mentioned the work that has been undertaken by the Productivity Commission, which looked extensively at the regulatory regime for charities and not-for-profit organisations in Australia and makes a recommendation for a charities regulator, a not-for-profit regulator. Would you support some kind of a regulator, a register, independent of the tax office?
We would support that if there was mechanism for complaint to be adequately addressed. In any commercial organisation, there is a complaints process and a complaints policy. I submit that a lot of these cults have no complaints policy except punishment and expulsion and escalation thereafter to the courts and bankruptcy and psychological damage.
Okay, so just in terms of that then, I understand what you're saying. You're talking about an individual being able to take some kind of...
Well, for the authority giving the tax exemption to base that upon or withdraw that upon, I'm not talking about one complaint. Right? Any organisation, I mean, me in my work, I've had a complaint against me. I'm still working because the complaint was adequately addressed properly in a democratic way. I wasn't kicked out, and if I was, I would be at the unfair dismissals.
Sure. So I'm just trying to understand that the thrust of your submission is to have two things. One would be some independence around the assessment around the tax deductibility issues and the tax treatment of organisations, and secondly, a complaints resolution mechanism.
Yes,
I think that would go hand in hand. If it was going to be that there is the qualifying thing about harm being done against the benefits that might be very minute compared to the harm, then we think that this is the only way that the two can go together in a way.
But
we don't-
we consider that if there is adequate harm, the benefit should be removed, not just an address of those harms, because they would be symptom of a systematic failure of the organisation to not provide harm.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The common law definition of charity is relief of poverty, the advancement of education, the advancement of religion and other purposes beneficial to the community not falling under any of the preceding heads. So how would you like to see that varied and amended? Would you like, what examples that might follow from the list of cults you've given us perhaps mean we exclude the advancement of religion?
I
And
think all of
recommend that
those,
be-
sorry, Mr. Chairman, I think all of those benefits are noble, but I think it has to be looked at if there's tax exemption, is it spreading into the community, or is it being deemed only available to a small group of people who are benefiting because of their religious belief and taking in the taxpayers' money to fund within their own organisation those things that you see as schools, as education. So I think we have to look at groups that are inclusive and not that are exclusive and not inclusive of seeing those taxpayers' money spread out into the community, which they should, in a way be part of if they are receiving that tax money for these noble causes. And I think that that's an area that really needs to be looked at, then against the harm that may be coming from groups because of its exclusiveness. And I think, without mentioning names, there's also a problematic group that has been looked at that does very much separate itself from, the general mainstream society and have schools very largely funded. And those people that are going to those schools are the benefit only of that community. So I think that, there's a broadness here, and I'm bringing it back all the time to what we're talking about, which is tax payers' money going without that sort of almost automatically when those things can be ticked. I think we look further into those areas, and I think the best way is to, perhaps what we've been talking about, is to hear and to recognise complaints when they come. Be willing to not just think it's a few disgruntled members who've been hurt, but to look seriously and deeply at those issues that will not go away.
Thank you. I said exclude religion just to be a little bit provocative, to see what you'd say, but it's really what you're asking for really is an assessment of the way the organisations operate and their structure and function internally.
There may be a broad presumption of the benefit of religion. We accept that a classic religion is a benefit. If a group of people worship together, that may provide some spiritual benefit. But if harm isn't addressed, then these beliefs can be subverted into other activities which are for the benefit of not what it would outwardly appear is the case.
It's very difficult to define a test for this, though, isn't it?
I think looking at the harm is the main part.
And also perhaps it has been brought up at when a group becomes a business
Yes,
and does not
very
get
specific,
looked at
yes.
from that point of view. We are certainly for the freedom of the groups to operate who have, the interest of the community and our belief systems and are operating on the whole probably, without a lot of these things happening. But the problem, I don't believe, and if we perhaps can stress that today, that the problem is not one or two groups. It's a much larger area that I think if we can bring that to the Senate today.
Well, thank you for that list. It's very interesting, I must say. You've put together a very comprehensive list of organisations which could be classified as cults. And with that, we'll have to conclude your evidence. So thank you very much for appearing this morning.